Okay, so recently Secretary of State Karen Bradley has brought to bear the situation, the debate, should they reopen the Leveson inquiry, part 2 of the Leveson inquiry. So for those who don't remember, Leveson inquiry back in 2011 was launched over allegations of News of the World phone hacking scandals, among which were Davina McCall, Ulrika Johnson.
Unfortunately, such national treasures as Davina McCall, Ulrika Johnson, and
however, though,
Gaza.
I think the reason. The whole reason it was launched, Gaza, that his phone was hacked.
Can we? Okay, we'll continue. Yes, that happened, but also perhaps more seriously, there was the phone hacking of Millie Dowler and allegations of the press bribing police officials, and also closeness of politicians in the media as well. So this all blew up, you'll remember, and it was a pretty big deal. The Leveson inquiry was launched in 2011. 2012, the results came out, and they found that newspapers recklessly pursued sensational stories, families of actors and footballers also have a right to privacy, and that the press wreaked havoc with the lives of innocent people. I think we can all agree on that. They hacked phones aplenty. It condemned the covert surveillance that was going on by the press of the public and public figures, and they found big failures of compliance and governance of the News of the World. And often the complainants, people who were bringing problems to the Press Complaints Commission or directly to the newspapers, were basically summarily dismissed, and even the victim of character assassinations as well. So there was this culture of just dismissal of people who dared to question and complain about the media. And then there have been some.
So the recommendations at the time were firstly an inquiry was set up as to the regulation body. At the time it was the Press Complaints Commission, the PCC, which was closed down on Lord Leveson's recommendation, and IPSO was launched, who you may have heard about, the International Press Standards Organisation. Also established was the Press Recognition Panel, the PRP, which is let's have a look. It's a Royal Charter approved press regulator. So they have the ability to bestow on any independent regulator, we use the word in inverted commas, independent regulator, such as IPSO or the newly created press. There's a list of standards that they have to comply to, the regulator has to comply to, in order to be recognised as this official.
And they were all based on this long investigation into what caused problems, right? So that's what this whole Royal Chart was supposed to establish. Yeah. What makes a regulator that's going to actually work and prevent these things from happening again.
So the reason why Karen Bradley has brought this case forward is she's questioning whether it's worth continuing with the investigations. £50 million has been spent so far on bringing people to justice. Operations Elvedon, Tuleta, Wheating, Operation Golding, different operations that have been trying to ensnare people who are implicated in these scandals. So far, 30 jobs, I believe, or 30 people, 40 convictions, have happened so far. The most recent of which is being tied up as we speak. Hence the reason why this is now being brought into public discourse.
They didn't want part 2 to begin until all of these operations and court cases and so forth were being still ongoing.
So this, the report that was brought forward is open to anybody, is open to the public. Anybody can get involved.
We're presuming you've all read it.
So the question remains, should this go ahead? Before we do so though, I think it's worth talking a little bit about IPSO and about these regulation bodies, what we have so far. So the people who are watching over the press, the mainstream press, or any press in this country, and exactly what they represent. So one thing that was interesting about IPSO, there was a pilling review. This was in September 2016. And this was supposedly an external review of IPSO, although it was set up, paid for, and had the terms of service agreed to by IPSO. So you do have to question the independence and externality of this review. Also, it neglected the regulatory funding company, so the RFC, the regulatory funding company, who actually organise the funding of IPSO, organise its structure, its membership, its rules, its investigations fund, and oversee its code via the code committee. This had no mention at all in the Pilling Review. And it's worth mentioning that on the board, on the national board, of the 4 members who are on the national board, one of them, P.S. Sana, belongs to the Times newspapers, Murdoch McLennan belongs to the Telegraph Media Group, and Kevin Beattie, the DMG Media, which are the overlords of the Daily Mail and the Metro.
And this is the board of?
This is the board of the regulatory funding company that organises the funding of IPSO. So they are the overlords, the overseers of IPSO. 3 of the main board members of that belong to the Daily Mail, the Telegraph, and the Express, which is crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And again, this was not mentioned in the Pilling Review at all. Also since then, IPSO have shown absolutely no desire to launch Stan's investigations. There's been over 250 complaints put forward, only 3 of which have made it all the way through to the courts.
Which, if I remember correctly, was one of the big complaints about the Press Complaints Commission, right? There was basically very few complaints which were ever actually taken to the point where there were some kind of consequences for whatever the media had done.
And in another report, a report of IPSO, it was found that it's because the bureaucracy is so huge. There are so many parts to filing a complaint, and there's so many opportunities for the media to come, for the media in question, the object of complaint to come in and step in and delay the proceedings even more.
And this is a big problem, right? Because if people see this long road stretching out, when they've already had this shit to deal with for whatever has made them complain, and then you look at the long, painful process you're going to have ahead of you and the low chances of success.
Yeah, and the cost, of course.
And the cost, and people aren't
going to bother.
Also,
Trevor Kavanagh, who played a key role in the Sun's infamous defamation of the Liverpool Hillsborough fans, he's now on IPSO's board of directors.
Oh, good.
The list goes on.
Excellent.
You could go on for hours about this. Another interesting point about them is IPSO have refused to be judged by or be assessed by the PRP. So this is if you remember, the commission or the committee that was set up to give regulating status. They refuse to be assessed by them, saying that they're associated with the government and therefore going to be impartial, will have some rights taken away. Whereas another regulatory body called Impress, which we've touched on before, they have recently been accepted and they are an official recognised regulator, which IPSO have refused to go along with.
Endorsed by the National Union of Journalists.
Also endorsed, yes. Yeah, exactly right. Who also called IPSO a pointless so-called regulator. So there you go. The odds are stacked against them. So the debate comes down to whether Part 2 should be launched or not. So to highlight, the question has enough progress been made? Have we discovered the links between the media and police, media and politicians? And is the current system of regulation sufficient to
prevent all the awful tragedies such as the hacking of Gaz's phone from ever happening?
Particularly that.
Again.
I hear that he's pretty up about that as well.
Let's just not get into it. So have we made enough progress? Is our media fixed now so we don't need to worry anymore?
What do you think?
There's been some progress, I think, right? There has been some progress. I mean, if you look at firstly, the fact that ministers and all of their kind of senior assistants and so forth have to disclose any media meetings. Now, that's super important, right? That's a thing now. That's something that we can be happy about. So that's good. There's the Royal Charter. I mean, that exists. We had this whole big process of Leveson, and the Royal Charter was put forward, and it's based on all of the things that led to this stuff happening. And there's a system there for what makes a good regulator. Now the big problem is, we've got Impress, right, and that's really hopeful. But you've got this main regulator which just isn't following these guidelines. Mm-hmm. The whole point of this massive investigation, which brought in people from all sides, it wasn't just the government, who did it. So that's an area of concern, isn't it? Are we satisfied with Ipso? Seems to have a lot of the same problems that the PCC had. I'm not sure.
It's worth noting as well, I didn't mention this before, but it's worth noting that they've tried to incentivize the joining of this, or the being accredited by the PRP, by excluding these companies. So Impress, for example, now they're an official regulator, now they've been assessed and approved, accredited by this organisation. They no longer have to pay damages in court, and that means if a complaint is brought against them, they won't pay any damages, even if they're found to be guilty. And vice versa, even if they win the case, if they win or lose, they won't pay damages. That's the point. Whereas if you're not part of this, so Ipso, for example, even if they win a case, they will have to pay the damages of the complainant. That's the whole point.
If we go ahead with part 2, right? That's the key thing. So there's this section 40 that they're deciding whether they're going to go ahead with or not, and that's the whole point of this consultation. And if they do implement this section 40, then yes, if you're not part of one of the approved regulators, you have to pay for any complaint brought against you, which you can see why certain people wouldn't be too pleased about, right?
I mean, okay, so for me, in terms of answering the question, should you go ahead? From what I can see, it seems that lots have been done in terms of bringing people or discovering these connections. This 50 million that's been spent has led to 40 convictions, one of which is still continuing today. So it's not like it's a defunct process. It seems like it's a necessary process that we are still trying to understand. And I don't know the ins and outs. The ins and outs aren't available for the public to see, as far as I can see. But it looks like progress has been made and should continue to be made. Also, the fundamental point is that we know that media regulation is insufficient. We can see that. Ipso, who completely dominate the mainstream media, who regulate the mainstream media, they're failing in their task. And so either we're not providing them with enough incentive to join this, to be assessed, which is to say the incentives or the punishments are not harsh enough, something's going wrong with that. And new recommendations need to be made.
It's clear that there needs to be more progress. I think a real sticking point is the press don't like anything connected to the government, right? And that's a problem that's been raised by The Guardian about, can the government manipulate to their benefit this organisation which is responsible for approving regulators. And I think the way that this debate is framed, I mean, it seems clear to me, at least, that the government needs to play some kind of role in regulating the media, and that sounds simultaneously awful and seems simultaneously necessary for some kind of limited. For some kind of limited, successful regulation. I think one area the media succeeds here in getting their point across better is that they're always the noble people holding government to account. But we can see from this whole farce that they're nothing but noble, trying to get the itty bitty details of $1 million, cell phone texts, not in the public interest. And I think that we have to be frank in that when they're sitting on the board meetings of their media establishment, they're not going, but this is all great, but are we really holding the government to account and serving our role as public guardians? No, they're not. They're thinking, have we got enough advertising revenue?
Are enough people buying our papers?
Are enough people buying our papers? And that is the primary concern. So to suggest...
Is that technically a nipple in that photo, so we can't have it? But people like boob, so how can we get around that?
This is a way that they're winning. But the truth is, they're businesses that sell people to advertisers. That's what they are. So I think when we consider from that perspective, it's no longer, we have to support the media to be free. We see that they're just another set of commercial businesses that the government has to play a role in regulating, right?
Yeah. Regulation is necessary, but to what extent is the question. So get involved in this. The link below will link you down to the actual document in progress. You can fill out a form, you can send it off. It's very, very easy to do, to get your opinion heard, to get it read out during this whole process.